Life had been good, better than good. For the past 10 years, Emily and I had built something solid, or so I thought. We had a nice house in the suburbs, steady jobs, and 2 beautiful kids. On the outside, we were the picture-perfect family. But things had been different lately. The warmth that once filled our home had been replaced by cold, tense silences and carefully measured words. The breaking point came on a Saturday evening. A small disagreement over the grocery list spiraled into something ugly. We screamed, old wounds resurfaced, and before I knew it, Emily packed a bag and stormed out. "I need space," she said. "I'll stay at my mom's for a while." She didn't even look back. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I had been too distant, too focused on work. Maybe I hadn't appreciated her enough. I tried calling her, texting her, apologizing, even when I wasn't sure what for. Her responses were short, clipped. "I need time," she kept saying. Weeks passed, and the pit in my stomach grew heavier. Something wasn't right. One evening, as I scrolled mindlessly through social media, I saw it, a picture of Emily, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't alone. A man's hand rested on her waist, too familiar, too comfortable. My blood ran cold. My wife wasn't just taking time to think. She was cheating on me. My hands clenched around the phone as I stared at the picture. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of rage and disbelief crashing over me like a tidal wave. I clicked on the profile of the man in the photo, but it was private, just a generic name, no obvious details. I went back to Emily's post, scanning the comments. A few of her friends had left harmless emojis, but one name stood out, Jason Whitman. The name didn't ring a bell, but something about it gnawed at me. I copied it and searched on Facebook, then LinkedIn. And there he was, mid-40s, fitness trainer, divorced. And the worst part? His gym was on the other side of town, nowhere near Emily's mom's house. If she had met him recently, it wasn't some accidental run-in. This had been going on for a while. I felt sick. How long had she been lying to me? How long had I been the fool, begging for her to come home while she was in another man's bed? I wanted answers. I wanted to hear her say it, to see if she had the nerve to admit what she'd done. My fingers hovered over the call button, but at the last second, I stopped. No. Not yet. If she was willing to betray me, who's to say she wouldn't try to take things further? Our house, our money, our kids. I needed to think to stay calm. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to be ready. That night I barely slept. My mind raced through every interaction, every sign I had ignored. The sudden distance, the late night errands, the way she kept her phone face down. It had all been there, but I had been too trusting, or too blind, to see it. By morning, my emotions had settled into something sharper, resolve. If Emily was willing to throw away our life together, I wasn't going to let her take everything with her. I needed to be smart, careful. This wasn't just about my pride, it was about my kids, my home, my future. The first step was gathering proof. I wasn't about to accuse her without solid evidence. I reached out to a friend, Mark, who worked in private investigations. We hadn't talked much lately, but when I told him what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "I'll handle it," he said. "Give me a few days." While he worked, I started securing my own position. I pulled up bank statements, checked on our assets, and made copies of everything. If Emily planned on making a move, I wasn't going to be caught off guard. Then I waited. 3 days later, Mark called. "You were right," he said. "She's with him. And I've got pictures." I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I had the truth now. The only question was, what was I going to do with it? I met Mark in a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. He slid a manila envelope across the table, his face unreadable. "Take a look," he said. My hands felt like lead as I opened it. Inside were a series of photos, Emily and Jason together. One showed them walking hand in hand near his gym. Another, her sitting across from him at a restaurant, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years. And then the worst one, Emily stepping out of a hotel, Jason right behind her, his hand on her lower back. There was no denying it now. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to breathe. "How long?" I asked. "At least a month, maybe more," Mark said. "She's been careful, but not careful enough." A month. She had been lying to me for at least a month, sneaking around while I sat at home, wondering how to fix things. Mark leaned forward. "Look, I know this is a lot. But before you do anything, think about your next move. If you want to come out of this with your house, your finances, and custody of your kids, you need to be strategic. You start throwing accusations without a plan, and she could turn this around on you." He was right. Emily had already betrayed me. Who's to say she wouldn't try to twist things in her favor? I had to be smart. So I nodded. "I'm not confronting her yet. Not until I'm ready." Mark smirked. "Good. Because something tells me she's already planning her next move." Mark's warning stuck with me. If Emily had been lying to me for over a month, there was no telling what else she had planned. I needed to stay ahead of her. First, I met with a lawyer. I didn't file for divorce, not yet. Instead, I asked about my options. I wanted to know exactly where I stood when it came to the house, our savings, and most importantly, our kids. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Lisa Carter, laid it all out for me. "If you can prove infidelity, it could work in your favor when it comes to property division," she explained. "But courts don't always care about cheating unless it impacts the kids or finances. The real issue is custody. You need to start documenting everything. How often she sees the kids, where she's staying, and anything that suggests she's neglecting them." Neglect. The word hit me hard. Emily was still their mother, and no matter how much I hated what she'd done, I didn't want to hurt them. But I also wasn't about to let her drag them through this mess. Over the next week I watched. I took notes. Emily only saw the kids twice, both times for just a couple of hours. The rest of the time she was too busy. Too busy with Jason, I was sure. Then, late one night, she sent a text. "We need to talk about the house." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. So this was it. She wasn't coming back. She wanted to take what was mine. I stared at Emily's text, my grip tightening around the phone. "We need to talk about the house." She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She had made her choice, Jason over me, over our family, and now she wanted to carve up our life like it was nothing more than a business deal. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. If I lost my temper, I'd lose control. And right now, control was the only thing keeping me ahead. I texted back. "Fine. When and where?" She responded within minutes. "Tomorrow afternoon. At the house." So, she still considered it hers too. That was going to be a problem. The next day, I was ready. I had already gone through the mortgage records, the deed, and the financials. The house was in both our names, but I had put in more money, a lot more. And if she thought she could just walk in and claim half like she was entitled to it, she had another thing coming. When she arrived, she looked different. Not guilty, not apologetic, just distant. Like she had already moved on. "I think it's best if we sell," she said, crossing her arms. "Split the money and go our separate ways." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, studying her. "And what about the kids?" She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she sighed. "We'll figure it out." That was all I needed to hear. She had already checked out. But she had no idea that I wasn't letting her walk away with everything. Not without a fight. I let her words hang in the air. "We'll figure it out." That told me everything I needed to know. Emily wasn't just done with me, she was ready to move on, ready to dismantle everything we built, piece by piece. But I wasn't about to let her. I crossed my arms and met her gaze. "Selling the house isn't happening." Her eyes narrowed. "Be reasonable, Matt. It's the best option for both of us." I almost laughed. "Best for who?" She wanted to cash out, run off with Jason, and leave me to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't playing along. I did my research, I said, keeping my voice even. I've put more into this house, financially and physically. I paid more toward the mortgage. I handled the renovations. I even paid the property taxes last year when you were between jobs. Her expression tightened. She knew I was right, but she wasn't going to admit it. That doesn't mean you get to keep it, she shot back. It's still legally ours. Then we'll let the lawyers decide, I said, pushing away from the counter. Because I'm not selling. Emily exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I don't want to go to court over this, Matt. Then don't. She gave me a long, measured look, then grabbed her purse. Fine. But you're making this harder than it needs to be. I watched her leave, my jaw tight. She thought this was hard now. She had no idea what was coming. The moment Emily walked out that door, I knew she wasn't giving up, she was regrouping. She had expected me to roll over, to agree to sell the house like some beaten-down husband desperate to move on. But I wasn't that man. Not anymore. I spent the next few days preparing. I went over my finances again, met with Lisa, and made sure I had every document proving my greater financial contribution to the house. More importantly, I kept track of Emily's behavior. She had barely seen the kids. Every time I offered for her to take them for the weekend, she had an excuse: work, errands, not feeling well. It was becoming obvious where her priorities were. Then, 3 days later, she texted again. We need to talk. It's important. I agreed to meet her at a cafe downtown. When I arrived, she was already there, sipping a coffee, her phone in her hand. She didn't look upset or regretful, just calculating. I spoke to a lawyer, she said, stirring her drink. Since the house is in both our names, I'm entitled to half. I leaned back. That's not how it works, and you know it. She sighed, as if I was the unreasonable one. Look, Matt. I don't want to fight over this. If you buy me out, I'll walk away. No courts, no drama. I almost laughed. She thought I'd just hand her a payday. After she cheated? After she abandoned our family? I folded my arms. How much are you asking? She named a number. A ridiculous number. I smirked. Not happening. Her face darkened. Then I guess we will have to go to court. I expected that. I was ready for that. But what she didn't know was, I had one last card to play. Emily thought she had the upper hand. She assumed that because the house was in both our names, she could strong-arm me into paying her off. But she had underestimated me. I met with Lisa again, laying everything out. The finances, the photos, her lack of involvement with the kids. Lisa nodded as she went through the documents. You're in a strong position, she said. The fact that she's barely seeing the kids will hurt her in custody discussions. And if we can prove she used marital funds on her affair, that could affect the division of assets. That was the key. If Emily had spent our money on Jason, hotels, dinners, gifts, that was financial misconduct. And I had a feeling she wasn't careful enough to cover her tracks. I pulled up our joint credit card statements. I had looked before, but this time, I dug deeper. There it was, charges for expensive restaurants I had never been to, hotel stays when she was supposedly at her mom's, even a spa day. I handed the statements to Lisa. She smiled. This is exactly what we need. Now, I was the one in control. Emily thought she could threaten me with court, but she had no idea what was waiting for her. I sent her a message later that night. Let's talk again. I have some new information you might want to hear. She replied almost immediately. Fine. Tomorrow. She had no idea that when we met, her entire plan was about to fall apart. The next afternoon, Emily walked into the cafe with the same confidence she always had when she thought she was in control. But today was different. I slid a folder across the table. Take a look. She hesitated, then opened it. Her face barely changed as she scanned the bank statements, the hotel charges, the expensive dinners, all of it. but I saw the way her fingers tightened around the pages. "This is nonsense," she said, pushing the folder back. "You're grasping at straws." I leaned forward. "No, Emily. This is proof that you used our money to fund your affair. And courts don't look kindly on that." She scoffed. "So what? You think a judge will give you the house just because I had a few dinners with someone?" I smiled. "No. But they'll care when they see that you've barely spent time with the kids. That you abandoned your responsibilities while I held everything together. And when they see that you wasted marital assets on your boyfriend? You'll be lucky to walk away with anything." For the first time, I saw real doubt flicker in her eyes. She wasn't winning this fight. She exhaled sharply, glancing away. "What do you want?" I didn't hesitate. "You walk away. No payout, no claim to the house. And we settle custody fairly, not on your terms." Her jaw clenched, but she knew she was out of options. Finally, she nodded. "Fine." Emily had come here thinking she'd leave with half of everything. Instead, she walked away with nothing. And for the first time in months, I finally felt free.